I was told to debunk this. Negroes now think they were Greeks. It's amazing how these West African primitives can try to interject themselves as being Egyptians or Moors or Greeks or Shakespeare or all these things they've come up with in their, idiotic fantasies of anywhere but West African primitive dung hut dwellers. That's what they want the world to believe. They want to crawl out of that primitiveness and try to usurp other places. And it's disgusting that now they've started making a bunch of videos where they try to say that they were somehow not in West Africa, that even somehow people back then um, were all black people running all around, and it was all okay. There was just West African Negroes lollygagging across Europe and through the Levant, and oh, they're part of the Bible too. And no, 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 no. Well, none of that actually exists. In fact, if you look at Hamites are Caucasians. It clearly describes it in Wiki as being Caucasian Egyptians and North Africans, which they always were. But let's just see how retarded this person can be about history.
The Greeks.
The dung hut dwellers who don't like their position in life and lie. By the way, anytime a video starts off with black truth, you know it's black lies. And black lies don't matter.
More than men. They were manly men, fierce in battle, philosophers and profound thinkers. They were the foundation of the white world. And for the Euro clowns, that means the Greeks have to, absolutely must be white people.
Well, they were white people, of course.
The highest ranking member of the forum to the lowliest slave. Not only that, but every bit of their culture had to come from them, with no outside influence, and certain...
No one believes that. We understand that they took influences from other cultures around them, and together with all that formed Voltron, which did make a great civilization. There are no great Negro civilizations. There are no great Negro temples. There are no great Negro anything. And in fact, we try to interject them into stories that they were never involved with, like this right here, and yet they still act all rad-manky, like, oh, all of these people should be black, or some kind of silly thoughts. They just don't like the fact that history doesn't contain them.
Nothing from the black world, even though Africa was far closer to them than Europe.
Africa was far closer, and of course Africa was named after a Roman general, Africanus, and it meant homeland of the Caucasians, and its name won't be changing for a long, long time. They don't care about far south sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, if you look at maps of the time, which I'll show you in a minute, they don't even know it existed. But yet these people want to project themselves into ancient histories that have such regalness that they aren't even involved with whatsoever.
Yes, sir, Greece was the quintessential white civilization, with strong, smart white people as far as the eye can see, and not a person of color for 1,000 miles.
In fact, everything in North Africa, Egypt, and anything in the known world outside of that was all Caucasians, and always has been. This Negroid migration of primitives that recently are now wearing new clothes is something quite recent, and before that, the Bantu expansion, before that, they were in a small area of West Africa, and really not mentioned by anybody whatsoever. No one knew they even existed, but they want to project themselves. It's sad, it's disgusting. Let's watch the idiot make a fool of himself.
The Greeks hated non-whites and made no bones about it.
This is Sparta!
Small wonder the Euro clowns love Greece so much.
Go tell the Spartans, passerby, that here, by Spartan law, we lie.
And lie they did. Lied their asses off. For starters, Greece was the world's first multiracial society. And
No, no, it wasn't. It may have become quite later, but nowhere near the time you're attempting to interject in any way, shape, or form. The black arch you see there is Caucasians drawn in a reverse form that they have. But sad, pitiful Negroids would like to use this somehow and say that those people were somehow black. Well, are swans black? Are the other creatures in there black? Or is it just art done in two colors? Because, yes, Whitey can use colors any way he wants to and describe things any way he wants to. Of course, especially before Negroids are even found in the world.
second, there is no connection between Greece and the Northern Europeans who never.
That's sad to try to say, too. Greece, and it's part of Eurasia, and they are connected somewhat, and there are so many ancient connections that have been made. The connection that is not made is how some Negro comes from West Africa 3,000 miles across a 200-mile thick desert up through a little point peninsula in the very corner that he didn't even know existed, and then lollygags his way through the Levant all the way into Anatolia and up into Greece. La 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 liar.
Never get tired of bragging about them. But before we get to how black Greece was, let's address this whole macho Greek myth. Everybody knows.
Somehow this Negroid is about to try to tear down the idea of the macho Greeks that ended up taking over the area in the Trojan Wars. He's going to try to deflate that in some way, all the time sadly trying to say that he was them, but then if he can't, he's going to deflate him because he can't manky throw poo.
That Greece was pretty much known for only two things: philosophy and homosexuality. And not just among men.
Remember, Greece was known for quite a few things. Only thing that you have in your mind is homosexuality. What an idiotic thing to even bring up. They had philosophy, they had so much of the arts and sciences, music, poetry. They're known for all of this. This homosexuality thing is a side note. By the way, there's homosexuals around today. By the way, blacks have an extreme homosexual problem. By the way, baby rape is the worst thing in Africa. So I don't want to hear anything. Homosexual rape and stuff is going on in Africa like crazy. They have no sense and do this exact thing that they're trying to point out here. It's disgusting, but let's watch it.
The word lesbian comes from the Greeks, the term being coined after the Greek island of Lesbos, made famous by the ancient Greek poetess Sappho, who apparently couldn't keep her mind or her hands off of other women. The Greek reputation for homosexuality even made it into pop references for sex, such as anal sex being referred to as doing it Greek style. Up until now, Greek men have been stereotyped by Western civilization as dainty, physically weak, and womanly.
Are gorgeous, sexy, and somebody that should be on a Harlequin novel. Women love that stuff. They don't really love this black lie bullshit. And it's disgusting to see him sit here and just be jealous of all of this and try to talk shit about it. It's disgusting. But let's continue.
All that changed in the last few years. The United States entertainment industry decided to help butch up the Greeks' image with movies portraying the Greeks as tough guys.
That's disgusting that he would think that that's the way the world works. Just because there wasn't a movie about Sparta, the day before that, we still knew the Greeks had done all these great things. It's just there wasn't a movie about it. Yet they're talking about fluffing it up like somehow all the Greek stories were all a lie, but this was a brand new made-up thing. No, these Greek stories go back thousands of years to the time before primordial time itself. And yet this jealous, pitiful, yakety-mouth Negro can't seem to come to grips with it. You can see how jealous he is of all of this and wish that blacks had some kind of culture like this, but they don't. They have a culture of being primitives and then eventually just capturing and selling their own people for beads and alcohol like a drive-through slave mart.
Even video games got in on the fun. First came Troy,
Blacks
which
don't like they're
tried
not
to
in
make
video
Achilles
games.
cool by reinventing him as some sort of badass straight out of the Matrix.
Immortality! Take it! It's yours!
The script seemed to be a paint-by-numbers attempt at making an epic. Lousy dialogue.
Now he's just going to talk crap about a well-accredited movie because it wasn't about black people again. How disgusting can this man get? Oh, he lives in disgust.
Pretty actors who can't act. Lots of fake blood and characters as flat as cardboard. But Tinseltown was just getting started. Next came Alexander. Oliver Stone wrote better dialogue than Troy, but he was so obsessed with incest, lust, homosexuality, and murder, he forgot about the movie. If he had really wanted to be bold, he would have told his audiences the truth, that most of Alexander's legend is a complete fraud. That he didn't conquer the world. At best, all he conquered was the Mediterranean and select portions of Western Asia.
All he did was collect the Mediterranean and select portions of Asia. This is basically the known world at the time. All of this is the known world at the time. It goes up through here more, and it goes up through Armenia more, all the way around through Greece. This area up here should all be red too. But that's all he had. Well, he didn't care anything about Arabia. He considered it to be pretty much a loss and a wasteland. And he's fixing to freak out about how he didn't go to Africa, I'm sure. And the reason he didn't go to Africa is because they didn't know he existed. I'll show that to you in a second, but watch him hang himself here.
But Oliver Stone is a white man.
Yes.
And the fictional Greece whites have created in their own minds proved too great a temptation for him to resist. Without a care for the facts, he repeated the age-old lie that Alexander the Fake traveled untold thousands of miles to the farthest reaches of the continent in his unstoppable quest to conquer the world.
Well, he did. The known world all the way through to India. Other than the Mongols of Genghis Khan, this was the largest area ever owned by one certain people under one person ever in the history of humanity. And the Mongol Empire, even though it was larger, most of that's wasteland. If he would have taken in the other wastelands and then went down and bitch slapped some Africans, he could have had the biggest title, but he only took what was worthy.
But Stone never bothered to tell his audience that Alexander never went into Africa,
Of course
which was
not.
only a few hundred miles from Greece. So, why did Alexander choose to travel thousands of miles across Asia into the middle of nowhere as opposed to going into Africa, which was only a hop, skip, and a jump away?
Well, he even went into Africa, but then he just turned back. Why did he turn back? Because anything past that was not worth anything. I will show that to you now. Yep, even a cursory look here at what they thought the world was at this time. Here's Herodotus' map. And it shows you that they knew Egypt, but yeah, they thought the Nile actually came from way over here in the Atlas Mountain, what they called Atlantis, the ancient story of Atlantis. And if you'll look closely, there is no sub-Saharan Africa. There is no Western Africa. They just say it rounds off. It doesn't even exist. Look, it's not there. No one knows it exists. It turns into a desert, and they say it's BS past that. Sure, there's some Ethiopians up here. What most ignorant negroids from West Africa who want to claim this area over here and all their history don't realize is that these people over here were actually called Ethiopians at a time. These people in the Arabian Peninsula were called sand dwellers, are Ethiopians quite a few times. And look, it's even on the map here. The India people were called Eastern Ethiopians. You know how the Southern India people, which this isn't even drawn correct, it doesn't have the point at the bottom like it should, but they call them Ethiopians too. And again, the Colchians, they say were the Egyptians, and they're way up here. They said anything above the Phasis River is considered to be Europa, and therefore they are in Europe. Also, what it doesn't show on this map is quite often Asia is ASIA, showing you that They called this area up here Libya, but they considered this part of Asia. Quite well. You can see it in most maps. This one is done a little more plain.
After the defeat of Darius III, the Persians ceded their imperial holdings to old Alex, and he walked into Egypt without any opposition.
By the way, ancient Darius himself said he was an Aryan. He calls himself an Aryan. Darius. His name emits it. Darius. Aries. The time of Aries. Something, again, blacks aren't involved with. Zodiacal stories. Regional through time. Not involved with it. They don't like it. So they make up fanciful stories like this idiot's trying to do.
Like all Greeks, he knew Nubia was where the Egyptians got their huge gold reserves. So
But
if
didn't care.
Alexander was so great, why didn't he simply keep marching south into Nubia and sweep the savage, primitive Negroes aside and take...
It's because they were savage, primitive Negroes, not worth his time or effort, and they had enough gold from all the other people they conquered and didn't need to have to deal with Negroids. How pitiful.
the land, the gold, and the glory. Because Queen Makeda of Ethiopia was waiting on him.
This is a story.
With a division-strong army of elephants and Ethiopian soldiers. Alex decided to keep heading east in search of enemies who didn't fight back. Though
Not necessarily. He went through quite a few fights. I'm pretty sure now by the statements made by this guy that he doesn't believe anything of real history and he just wants to interject Negroids anywhere he can. It's sad to see something like this. It really is.
his northern European admirers always seem to conveniently forget that he left the entire continent of Africa untouched.
Not true. He took the part that they knew of at the time as shown on my map, and of course, everything up here they knew about. Then it became a desert, and they didn't know this existed. If you look at the map, this green area here is just knocked off. The horn isn't even drawn. They don't know this exists. Black people didn't exist at this time, but they sure want to act like they did, and they were somebody. Didn't do nothing.
But, as ridiculous as Troy and Alexander were, nothing could prepare the world for the outrageous spectacle of 300.
Incredible he would say that, as ridiculous as his countries were. You know, the ridiculous thing is that blacks are just primitive pre-Stone Age dung hut dwellers. And the ridiculous thing is that they don't realize that they were, just a few generations ago, those people. In fact, look at the people there, the non-colonized areas, and they are still as primitive as any caveman ever was, the most primitive people on the planet with the lowest IQ. You learn them up a little bit, though, and next thing you know, they start coveting, bearing false witness, lying, blaspheming the image of God and history that they're not involved with. Disgusting.
Which became the magnum opus for white supremacists who clearly saw it for the race war analogy that it was. In that movie, the Greeks were reimagined as uber macho dudes who not only scorned homosexuality, but frequently engaged in superhuman feats of battle. Now, the director of 300, Zack Snyder, is a Jew, So the anti
Caucasian Jews. There are no black Jews.
Arab slant of the film was understandable, but the anti-black slant was not.
Especially in the fact that there were no blacks at that time, but they want to interject him in there, so they interject him in there, and he kicks his ass into a hole.
Whereas the movie Troy went to great lengths to bleach all non-whites from view, 300, on the other hand, took great pains to put blacks into the movie every chance it got.
And yet blacks still whine. They wanted to be in a starring role somehow. Why can't I be Nero? Well, because you're a Negro and not involved. We try to involve you and you get manky mad. It's a worthless endeavor.
Though never in a flattering light.
Blacks don't have a flattering light.
Leonidas is shown disparaging the men of Athens as effeminate.
The Athenians have already turned you down. And if those philosophers and boy lovers.
But the Spartans engaged in rampant homosexuality just like the Athenians did. In fact, their practice was to fight naked so as to jump on fallen enemy soldiers and, well, you can guess.
How disgustingly stupid this Negro sounds. Whenever there's definitely stories of blacks doing this exact same thing, but he has to make up conjecture to say this is what went on. It's terrible that somebody would try to slander. So he first tried to say that they are Greeks, and now he's spending time slandering and talk about the homosexuality and all kinds of stuff. Isn't it funny how Negroes flip-flop back and forth on whether they are or aren't, and cutting down shit and trying to talk shit about others and never actually reflecting upon themselves and fixing their own problems? I think it's the reason we still have this problem. That and the fact that they're just recent domesticated primitives with new clothes on.
Nearly everyone in the movie talks about freedom and resisting slavery.
Sure,
The
yeah.
Greeks in the movie refer to the Persian army as Xerxes' slaves and the slaves of Xerxes.
Yeah, see, white people had slaves long before they ever found the black people. Of course, Islamic slave trade started 900 years before the Americas were ever found, and then Jew Daddy came down, which is not white people that are all blamed for this. Whites were in oppression also. The Irish were the first slaves in America and South America, but black people don't want to hear that. They can't hear that, just like they can't hear the fact that they captured and sold their own people. They've got to live under this pity thing and pull a race card. They can't have the truth in their face, so they make up fantasies like this BS this guy continues.
But what Zack Snyder doesn't tell you is that the Greeks had slaves, the Helots, whom they routinely killed as part of their regular training, because a Spartan was required to kill at least one person before he could officially graduate from training and finally be assigned to a unit. The Helots were almost always the target of choice. The Spartans subjected the Helots to a wide variety of humiliations, such as forcing them to drink pure wine until they could barely stand. Then the Spartans brought in their children to laugh and mock the Helots. This was done in order to teach Spartans from an early age to have no respect for Helots.
But Helots aren't black people in any way, shape, or form. They're Hellenites, and that's different. That's Romans taking over Greeks and a whole different story, and things that, of course, Negroes aren't involved with again either. By the way, during this time, children and adults drank a watered-down wine, and anybody that drank a thicker regular wine would become inebriated fairly easy. It's easily and well known, but he wants to put conjecture and false beliefs on that too. I bet the only people that actually get through the end of this and believe his bullshit are ignorant, recently domesticated Negroes who pitifully want to believe anything other than the truth of where they came from.
So the Spartans committed the same kind of atrocities the movie accuses the Persians of doing. Only the Spartans did far worse.
Ooh, should I even go to part 2? I might look through it, pick through it a little bit, but it's been dismissed. And this is Retarded Black Lies.